Ivy Carter, a senior risk analyst at North Peak Financial, said, "I need the Anderson portfolio analysis on my desk by tomorrow morning." Trevor Phillips walked past my cubicle without waiting for my response, his pricey cologne still lingering, long after he vanished into his corner office. I sighed, looking at the clock on my computer. It was already 6 p.m. in Houston, and another late night loomed. My days were filled with creating models to protect our clients' investments, and more importantly, to protect the firm's bottom line. Ivy Carter has spent the last 4 years at North Peak developing risk assessment models that have subtly become the backbone of our operation, and I had been promised a promotion to director if I could help the firm through what everyone knew was coming. A market correction that threatened to destabilize our most lucrative portfolios. I grabbed my phone to call off another meal with my sister. "Hey, Vanessa, is there any chance we could do this tonight? I just got another project from Trevor." "Ivy again?" With a tone of despair, she stated, "This is the third time this month." "I understand, but this might serve as the impetus for my advancement. Things will settle down after I take over as director." "That's what you said last year," Vanessa responded. "Just don't let them take advantage of you." Her words lingered in my mind as I hung up the phone. The truth was, I loved what I did. I had spent months honing a proprietary risk assessment formula that could identify exposure to market volatility with unprecedented accuracy. I called it the Adaptive Market Vulnerability Index, or AMVI for short, and it was my masterpiece. I took great pleasure in developing mathematical models that could predict market behavior. This was not the first time I had seen Trevor eyeing my work with unusual interest. 2 weeks prior, at a meeting with the executive team, I had presented preliminary results from my model, showing how it predicted several market anomalies that traditional models had missed. The room fell silent as I walked them through the mathematics, and even our normally reserved CEO, Jonathan Wells, leaned forward in his chair. As I settled in for another long night, I noticed Trevor watching me through his office window. He quickly looked away when we met, but not before I noticed something unsettling in his expression. "That's why I've been mentoring her," Trevor told the room, grinning tightly and putting his hand on my shoulder. "It's impressive work, Ivy," he'd said. "If this performs as well as you believe, it could save us millions when the correction hits." I knew she was onto something special, but I kept my expression neutral, even though Trevor had done nothing of the sort. In fact, he had repeatedly questioned the validity of my approach until the preliminary results proved too strong to ignore. As I returned my attention to my computer, I saw a notification, a calendar invite from Trevor to talk about AMVI performance. The market correction hit harder and faster than anyone had expected, and over the course of 3 turbulent days, global markets plunged, sending investors into a panic. Emergency meetings filled North Peak's conference rooms as analysts rushed to assess the damage. The private was scheduled for tomorrow after the morning meeting, and I accepted it with a twinge of unease because I felt that something wasn't right, and I needed to protect myself and my work before it was too late. Though competitors reported massive losses, North Peak's exposure was minimal, and by Friday afternoon, it was evident that my model had just saved the firm tens of millions of dollars. I expected celebration, possibly even an immediate announcement of a promotion, but something extraordinary happened amid the chaos. The portfolios I'd restructured using my AMVI model held steady, outperforming market benchmarks by staggering margins. "The executive team is thrilled with the performance of our risk management strategy," Trevor said, reclining back in his chair after calling me into his office and shutting the door. I'll be briefing the board on Monday about how we navigated the correction. That's great, I responded. I've prepared a detailed report showing exactly how the AMVI model was identified. No need, said Trevor, dismissively waving his hand. I've already compiled everything the board needs to see. He tossed a document across his desk and said, "This is the press release that will be sent out tomorrow. Could you please check it for any technical errors?" My name was nowhere to be found in the release, which described North Peak's creative risk assessment approach that had protected client assets during the market volatility and gave credit to Trevor Phillips, head of risk management, for its development. I scanned the document, my heart sapping with every paragraph. As the department director, I developed the AMVI model. There seems to be an oversight, I observed cautiously. I am responsible for all work completed under my direction. The model was refined and implemented with my guidance and authority, but I created the core algorithm, was Trevor's seamless response. You work for North Peak, Trevor interrupted, his tone sharpening. He didn't smile. Your work belongs to the firm, and as your supervisor, I decide how it's presented to the board and the public. Of course, you'll be recognized within the department. I've even authorized a small bonus for your contribution. The director position I'd been aiming for would undoubtedly go to Trevor after this victory, so I bit the inside of my cheek to keep my cool. I understand, I murmured at last, setting the news release back on his desk. This wasn't just about credit. It was about my career trajectory. Great. I now want you to describe the settings you used for the stress test. The board will ask questions, and I want to be ready. For the next hour, I watched Trevor went over the technical details of my model, watching as he took meticulous notes that he would use to pass off my work as his own. As I talked, a plan started to take shape in my mind. Trevor may think he had won, but he had forgotten one important fact about me. I never left myself unprotected. The board meeting went exactly as I had anticipated. Trevor left the conference room smiling triumphantly, surrounded by executives who were congratulating him. The risk strategy performed brilliantly, he told me. Trevor mentioned you helped with some of the technical implementation, he said. Well done, I forced a smile. Thank you, sir. Later that afternoon, the company-wide email arrived. Trevor had been promoted to Executive Director of Risk Management, effective immediately. The announcement cited his visionary approach to market volatility and the development of proprietary risk assessment methodologies that positioned North Peak ahead of the market correction. As colleagues stopped by his office with congratulations, I remained at my desk, quietly adding the finishing touches to a document I'd been preparing for weeks. Long before the market correction, I'd sensed what might happen. Trevor had a history of claiming credit for subordinates' work, something I'd learned from a former colleague who'd left the firm bitterly after a similar experience. So, I'd taken precautions. 3 months earlier, working with a patent attorney friend on evenings and weekends, I'd filed for trademark protection on the core mathematical formula that powered the AMVI model. The application had been carefully worded to cover the unique algorithm while excluding any proprietary North Peak data or specific implementations. According to my employment contract, general mathematical concepts I developed were not automatically company property, only their specific application to company systems. The trademark had been granted 2 weeks ago. After the markets closed, Trevor stopped by my desk, wearing the self-satisfied expression that had become his trademark. I wanted to personally thank you for your hard work, he said, loud enough for nearby colleagues to hear. The bonus should hit your account next pay period. He leaned closer, lowering his voice. You're great with numbers, Ivy. Just not the ones on your paycheck. I looked up, meeting his gaze steadily. Congratulations on your promotion, Trevor. He appeared briefly perplexed by my composed manner, but soon recovered. I'm glad you understand how things work, he said, adding, You deserve everything that's coming to you. I'll need the Anderson portfolio metrics updated with the new risk parameters by tomorrow. Of course, I said. I'll leave everything ready for you. Trevor nodded and left without realizing that I had just told the truth. I would leave everything ready, including the Anderson portfolio, copies of my original work, and proof of the dates that each component was created. The email draft I had been working on was scheduled to send automatically at 9:01 a.m. Monday morning, with the subject line, Resignation effective immediately. The attachment was a formal notification that any further use of the AMVI methodology would require appropriate licensing from its registered trademark holder. Trevor was unaware that I had already set up a meeting with North Peak's biggest rival for Tuesday morning, and they were very interested in licensing my algorithm. On a crisp autumn morning, I entered North Peak's shiny office tower for what I knew would be the last time, nodding to the security guard as I swiped my badge. The elevator's familiar ping and the office's quiet hum felt suddenly alien, like I was visiting a place I'd once called home. I sat down at my desk and turned on my computer for the last time. At exactly 9 a.m., my resignation email would be sent automatically to Trevor, Human Resources, and Jonathan Wells. I had timed it perfectly. Trevor always held his newly created executive director's brief at 9 a.m. on Mondays, presenting to the senior leadership team. I spent the next hour carefully removing personal belongings from my desk, making sure not to attract attention. A picture of Vanessa and me at the Grand Canyon, a tiny jade plant I'd kept alive for 3 years, a coffee mug with a joke about a mathematical formula that only other analysts ever understood. All of these items vanished into my bag as I methodically removed myself from the room. At 8:55 a.m., I took one last look around, then walked calmly to the restroom, where I waited, watching the seconds pass on my watch. At exactly 9 a.m., I felt a faint vibration, my phone confirming the automated email had been sent. When I stepped out, I saw Trevor's assistant running to his meeting room with a worried look on her face, and I saw Trevor making a confident presentation to the executive team through the glass walls. Then he looked at his phone, scowled, and went on talking. While a few other executives checked their devices at the same time, Jonathan Wells got up suddenly, interrupting Trevor's presentation, and even from a distance, I could see the bewilderment and alarm spreading across Trevor's face as he read whatever message had just arrived on his phone. I didn't wait to see more. I walked to the elevator, hit the lobby button, and left North Peak Financial for the last time with practiced composure. I took a deep breath of the morning air outside, feeling oddly light, and my phone started buzzing with messages and calls right away. I ignored them all as I walked to a nearby coffee shop, only checking my messages after I was seated at a corner table with a cappuccino. I saw that I had dozens of text messages, 6 missed calls from Trevor, 4 from Human Resources, and 1 from Jonathan Wells. Trevor, what the hell is this? Give me a call now. Trevor, company property cannot be trademarked. Legal action is warranted in this case. Trevor, as you are. I sipped my coffee quietly while I watched the messages build up, which was a huge mistake. I then read the official Human Resources response when I opened my email. We have received your letter of resignation, Ms. Carter, along with the notification. that goes with it about the AMVI technique trademark. Our legal staff has been tasked with reviewing this case right away. We would like to remind you of your employment agreement's confidentiality requirements. A representative will get in touch with you soon to discuss exit protocols and the grave issues brought up in your correspondence. This response was exactly what I had expected, which is why I had hired Patricia Winters, one of Houston's leading intellectual property lawyers, weeks before. I sent her the email with the straightforward message, "It's begun." Within minutes, she replied, "Go ahead as scheduled. I'll take care of any correspondence from their legal team." Jonathan Wells himself sent me the next communication that drew my attention. "Ivy, the allegations of AMVI ownership and your abrupt resignation worry me. I would value the chance to speak with you personally about before things get worse. Kindly give my assistant a call to set up a meeting for today." This was not what was expected. I hadn't accounted for the possibility that the CEO would get in touch with me directly in all of my planning. After some hesitation, I concluded that talking to Wells could give me important information about the company's response strategy. I carefully prepared my response. "I'm available to meet at 2 p.m., Mr. Wells, at Patricia Winters' workplace today. As my legal representative, she will be there." After adding the address, I hit the send button. My phone rang as I was finishing, my coffee, and it was an unknown number. I heard a polished, silky voice when I responded. "This is Veltri Dynamics Chief Operating Officer, Elaine Brenner, Ms. Carter. I am aware that you will be talking to us about something fascinating tomorrow. I'm wondering if you would be available today instead, considering the recent events." The top 3 floors of a modern downtown skyscraper housed Veltri Dynamics offices, which provided floor-to-ceiling windows with expansive views of Houston. I was aware of Elaine Brenner's power move when she personally greeted me in the reception area. She was known for her strategic thinking and decisiveness as Veltri's COO and the company's first female executive. She led me to a meeting room where 3 other executives were waiting and said, "Thank you for accommodating the schedule change." Our staff was keen to speed up our discourse because of recent occurrences. Her reference to recent events was now catching on like wildfire in the financial sector. Financial news sites had somehow learned of my departure and trademark claim, and I had my doubts about who was to blame. "I appreciate your interest in the market-beating formula." All morning, my phone was ringing with alerts from financial news, apps with headlines ranging from "Risk Model Ownership Dispute Rocks North Peak Financial" to the more dramatic "Mathematical Mutiny, Analyst Claims Ownership." I responded, placing my portfolio on the gleaming conference table, though I must admit that I'm interested in how you found out about the situation so fast. Elaine grinned. "The financial community in Houston is not as large as it seems. People pay attention when someone creates a risk model that performs 23% better than the market during a correction." She raised an eyebrow when the same individual went on to assert separate ownership of the process. Let's assume that before the markets opened, my phone began to ring. I spent the following hour introducing Veltri's executive team to the AMVI methodology. I described the fundamental algorithm, showed how well it worked throughout the correction, and listed possible uses for it outside of the current implementation. I was careful to stick to the wording of my trademark application throughout my presentation, using solely the mathematical ideas I had created and avoiding any confidential North Peak data or particular implementations. The room was quiet for a few seconds after I was done. Gregory Turner, Chief Risk Officer at Veltri, stated, "Impressive," but he had to pose the obvious query. "How can you be sure the trademark will endure?" "North Peak will fight this hard." This was a worry I had expected. I handed out copies of a Patricia-prepared legal brief and opened my portfolio. Work product created using company resources, data, or systems is specifically covered by my employment agreement with North Peak, I clarified. However, I used my own tools and resources to independently establish the fundamental mathematical theory that drives AMVI. I have time-stamped electronic records, documentation of the algorithm's development, and even witnesses who can vouch for my work on the idea outside of North Peak. I stopped so they could look over the brief. Most significantly, I set a clear precedent for independent development by disclosing the general mathematical concept to the Patent Office prior to its implementation at North Peak. Elaine and her coworkers looked at each other. "And you're offering us exclusive licensing rights for the first year?" "Yes," I replied, "at which point we can negotiate continued exclusivity or explore other arrangements." I mentioned a figure that caused one of the executives to choke and asked, "What are your terms?" Elaine remarked, "That's substantial," with caution. "So is a 23% performance advantage during a market correction," I replied. "Consider that North Peak saved approximately $50 million using my model. What would that kind of protection be worth to Veltri's portfolio?" Handshakes and promises of a formal offer within 24 hours marked the end of the meeting. Elaine answered the question I had been waiting for as she led me to the elevator. "Why didn't you take this to North Peak first? Surely they would have compensated you appropriately once they understood the situation." I grinned. I felt a sense of satisfaction as the elevator doors closed. "Let's just say North Peak and I have fundamentally different perspectives on appropriate compensation and recognition." The door shut. Jonathan Wells confirmed our 2 p.m. appointment when my phone vibrated with a new message. "Getting together." The actual conflict was about to start. Tasteful artwork, muted lighting, and furnishings that whispered costly without. Shouting it were all features of Patricia Winter's law office, which radiated quiet confidence. As we waited for Jonathan Wells to arrive, we went over our plan in her private conference room. I nodded, but my mind was elsewhere. "Remember," Patricia warned, "this is a fact-finding mission for both sides. Don't volunteer information they don't explicitly request, and don't discuss your meeting with Veltri." My gut was knotted with fear, even though I had planned it carefully. I had never before taken on a man with Jonathan Wells's level of authority directly. Patricia's assistant brought in the CEO of North Peak Financial at exactly 2 p.m. I was shocked to see that he arrived by himself, without Trevor or a legal team, just Jonathan Wells in a spotless suit with a slim leather portfolio. He said, "Ms. Carter?" and held out his hand. "Thank you for agreeing to meet. And, Ms. Winters, I've heard excellent things about your work." Following greetings and courteous declines of the refreshments given, Wells took a seat in his chair and studied me with an expression that was difficult for me to read. "I'll be direct." He launched into it. "Your resignation and trademark claim have created a significant situation for North Peak. Before our respective legal teams turn this into a protracted battle, I wanted to understand your perspective personally." Patricia gave me a nod so I could answer. "I developed the core AMVI algorithm independently," I said. "While I implemented it at North Peak using company data and systems, the underlying mathematical formula remains my intellectual property. When Trevor claimed full credit for my work and received a promotion based on that misrepresentation, I felt I had no choice but to protect my interests." Wells listened without interjecting, then took out papers from his portfolio. He passed them over the table and added, I've reviewed the press release and announcement that went out after the market correction. It appears Trevor presented the AMVI model as his own development, with no mention of your contribution. He stopped. This contradicts what he told me privately about the model's origins. Was not what I was expecting. I looked at Patricia, who had her poker face intact. She said, "Can you elaborate?" Wells gave a nod. In our initial discussions about the model, Trevor described it as a collaborative effort, with you handling the technical aspects under his strategic direction. Based on that understanding, I approved his promotion to executive director. That's not accurate, was my cautious response. Trevor actively questioned the validity of my approach until the preliminary results proved successful. He provided no meaningful input to the development of AMVI. After examining me, Wells grabbed another document from his portfolio. They struggled to grasp the fundamental algorithm. This morning, our technical team attempted to update the model parameters without your guidance. According to his research, Trevor is unable to describe the model's true operation. The audience fell silent as the implication became clear. Trevor had taken credit for a model that he was unable to even describe. Patricia said, "Mr. Wells, although this information is enlightening, it doesn't alter the core problem. The underlying AMVI methodology is protected by a legitimate trademark owned by my client. North Peak would need the appropriate licensing for any further use." Wells gave a slow nod. "I get it, but I have another idea to think about before we talk about the terms of the license." He looked straight at me. "Ivy, I would like to extend an opportunity to you to work directly under me as the Executive Director of Innovation at North Peak. Full credit for the AMVI model, a generous benefits package, and the freedom to assemble your own team are all part of the position." All of a sudden, the room felt incredibly still. This was not at all what I had in mind. "Mr. Phillips is no longer with North Peak as of this morning," Wells said in response to my question, Trevor. "He should have been fired right away for misrepresenting your job." I experienced a surge of validation that was swiftly followed by doubt. I hadn't thought about the potential of a better position at North Peak because I had been so preoccupied with my exit strategy. I carefully stated that I appreciate the offer, but I wanted to let you know that I've already had some initial conversations with Veltri Dynamics regarding the licensing of AMVI. Financial news sites were flooded with articles the following morning. Trevor Phillips is leaving North Peak amid an intellectual property disagreement. North Peak has named a new executive director of innovation. The risk model inventor was promoted following an ownership dispute. I had accepted Jonathan Wells' offer with a number of important conditions following tough negotiations that continued long into the evening. First, I would be officially recognized by North Peak as the only person who developed the AMVI methodology. Second, I would give North Peak exclusive implementation rights while maintaining personal trademark ownership. Lastly, I would have full control over a brand new innovation section that has a sizable budget and hiring power. It was much more than I had anticipated when I had made my travel plans. I couldn't believe how drastically things had changed as I took the elevator to my new executive room on the top floor of North Peak. Trevor had already moved out of his old office and into my new one. As I put my stuff down and sat down behind the large desk, the breathtaking vista of downtown Houston unfolded before me. I was thinking when there was a knock on the door. "Your first executive meeting starts in 15 minutes, said Melissa, my designated assistant, and Mr. Wells asked me to deliver this personally. She gave me an envelope and silently left. A handwritten note from the CEO was inside, with the following message. Ivy, welcome to the executive team. Your integrity and brilliant work deserve this recognition. I apologize for not recognizing the situation sooner, but I'm grateful we've retained your talents at North Peak. Looking forward to your leadership, Jonathan. A draft press release with the headline, North Peak Financial promotes Ivy Carter, creator of market-beating AMVI methodology to Executive Director of Innovation, was placed underneath the note for my approval. My phone buzzed with a text message from an unidentified number as I was getting ready for my first executive meeting. Congratulations on the promotion. You were always destined for greatness. Have some coffee? The executive team was waiting for me in the conference room, so I smiled, erased the message without replying, and went to the room. After 6 months, I was speaking to a group of financial journalists and industry analysts at the North Peak Conference Center, where a large screen behind me showed performance metrics of the expanded AMVI system that I and my new team had developed. I explained that the financial industry has historically relied on reactive risk management, and then I moved on to the next slide, which showed that the AMVI 2.0 framework represents a paradigm shift toward predictive analytics, identifying vulnerability patterns weeks before traditional indicators show cause for concern. As I finished, the room erupted in applause, followed by a flurry of questions that demonstrated real interest in the methodology I'd developed. The presentation continued with examples of how our improved system had handled future market volatility with remarkable precision. I shook her hand, pointing out the absurdity of the circumstance, and remarked, "We've met," as Jonathan Wells came up with a woman I instantly recognized, Ela Brenner from Veltri Dynamics. "Excellent presentation, Ivy," Wells said. "I believe you know Elaine?" This is impressive work, but I must admit that I was disappointed when our licensing discussions fell through," Elaine stated with a professional smile. Wells glanced between us curiously, and I politely said, "Elaine and I have been discussing a potential strategic partnership between North Peak and Veltri. Sometimes things work out differently than expected. I figured you might be able to share some ideas given your background." As the discussion went on, I thought about how completely the roles had been reversed. 6 months before, I was getting ready to assist Veltri in competing with North Peak. Now, I was talking about how the two companies could work together, with my innovation section at the core of the possible alliance. My journey from underappreciated analyst to executive had taken a remarkable turn, and I couldn't help but smile as I headed home later that evening after receiving a notification on my phone from a financial news alert that Trevor Phillips had been hired as a junior risk analyst at a small regional firm, a significant step down from his executive role at North Peak. "You taught me the most important lesson of my career in the finance industry. The most powerful asset isn't money or connections, but knowing exactly when to leverage it."